Hey folks, this is Lucid, and we're going to be covering a very specific kind of narrow topic right now, and that is going to be the enlarged bless. And special thanks to Eric who commissioned this video. I think it's a great video to talk about, and one of the reasons is we have the tournament going now, and there have been quite a few people who have picked enlarge in the tournament, and a couple of which who have already won. With that bless, and of course the tournament was won last year by people that had the enlarged bless. So I want to talk about it. It is, I guess we'll go to the pretender creation screen and then we'll come back here. I've got a little test arena where we can test some things out. But if we're going to talk about it, we might as well first talk about how much it costs. It's a Earth 4 Nature 3 bless. It used to be incarnate, meaning you had to have your pretender awake for it to be active. And it didn't get picked that much, because a lot of times if you went incarnate, you were going to get something better like regen or something. But when it switched to being non-incarnate, it opened it up to a ton of nations that were building kind of like rainbow and prism blesses. And a lot of the elf nations where you want a lot of the stat buffs rather than some of the harder buffs like regen. Anyway, larger, what it does is it gives you +1 size, it gives you 30% HP, it gives you 3 strength, -1 defense, and 2 map move. Okay, that's it. Let's talk about when this is good and when it's not, like how all of these different attributes affect you. Let's first focus on the size. When you go up in size, when is that good, when is that bad? Well, if you're size 5 and you go to size 6, it means you can no longer be trampled. And that's pretty nice, especially when you're worried about nations that may be doing like various trampling strategies. Either they have elephants, they can summon air elementals, they have earth elementals. Anytime you're worried about that, you kind of get rid of that when you go up to size 6. So size 5 nations, it's something to consider. The other thing is if you're size 5, and there's not a ton of size 5 nations, or nations with a lot of size 5 units that are sacred, but if you're one of those, usually you can't pack much in that additional 1 spot in a tile, because tiles get 6 spots. If you're size 5, you take up 5 of them. Not many things can fit in that 1 spot, right? Going up to size 6, usually you're not going to decrease the amount of stuff you can pack in there. It's kind of, in some ways, it's kind of free. The other thing is if you're very large, that HP bonus is pretty nice, because when you have 50 jumping all the way up to you're at 60, jumping all the way up to 80 is a pretty, or almost 80 is a pretty nice little bump in terms of HP. And a lot of times you're going to try to have like regen gear or something on top of giant chassis and stuff. Maybe not if you're taking, you might not have it as part of your bless if you're taking larger, but yeah, it's pretty good. The next thing about being bigger is you're going to pack less densely. And I kind of referenced that earlier, but if you're size 2 and you go up to size 3, you're only going to be able to fit 2 units per square instead of 3. So on one hand, your units are going to be bigger, they're going to be stronger, they're going to have more hit points. On the other hand, they're going to have fewer per tile, which means often less damage output per tile. But this has a yin and a yang. The good part of it is things which target based on area of effect. So it's a lot of evocations, it's things like trample, it's things that are area of effect attacks like brands or fire elemental attacks. All those things, they are going to be less effective against you because you're going to have fewer things in that tile. So against all of those things, it's a buff. The other thing about that is some things that trample are not, like there's size 6 tramplers, but there's also size 3 tramplers and size 4 tramplers. And they're not going to be able to trample you if you go up from size, like if you're a cav and you're getting hit by chariots, a lot of which are size 4, well, you go from size 3 to 4, you're not going to be trampled by those guys anymore. And now they're going to have to hit you, and that's not going to be as effective. The other thing, and this is perhaps one of the biggest parts of the size increase, is that if you cross the threshold from size 3 to size 4, you're going to get a bonus to weapon length. Everything that's size 4 and above, you take a look at whatever the weapon they have is, and you add 1 to the length of it. And what that can mean is if you have a long weapon on a size 3 unit and you put enlarge on it, it will then become an even longer weapon, and then you'll probably get a significant amount of repels in a combat. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of like cavalry will have lances, and that lance is length 3, and a lot of the things you fight are either having length 1 or length 3 weapons. Those are kind of very common. If you go up to size 4, you will then start repelling almost all of those normal weapons. You'll start repelling the length 3 weapons and the length 1 weapons, and you're going to get a lot of repel checks. It's going to help a lot in expansion. Almost all the indie stuff is length 1 or length 3. So that is a major bonus to increasing your sizes if you cross that 3 to 4 threshold. If you're already size 4, you don't really get much of an additional bonus at all, going from size 4 to size 5 in terms of being able to repel. If you go from size 2 to size 3, it also doesn't apply. But going from size 3 to size 4 will give you a repel. Now, there's a downside to that, which is size 3 units, you can pack 2 per square. When you go from size 3 to size 4, you can only pack 1 per square now. Now, you have a vacant spot to put a size 2 unit in that square with you. But if you're not doing that, you are basically cutting in half your attack density. And so that is a big malice to weigh against that. So those are the main effects of size. I'm trying to think if there's other effects. The hit points can be nice. Yeah, I mean, I would say generally the hit points is probably better on the bigger, stronger units. So like on giants, it matters more, but it's still going to make a difference on all the, even on human stuff. And the strength is a really good pickup. When you look at what this costs, the first, like to get strength of the earth, which is generally considered a very value pick, you're spending 3 to get 2. And here you're already getting 3 with just 4. So in some ways, you're getting like better bang for your buck on the earth for converting that into strength than you are just buying strength of the earth. On the other hand, you are getting -1 to defense. When you compare this with the nature stuff down here, if you got 3 hit points in resilient, like a human thing is going to have 10 HP. So worst case, larger is going to get you 3 more HP, but it can get you potentially much more than 3 HP. But you're basically getting that kind of for free in this. I mean, not for free, but like when you look, you spend 3 nature points. You could have spent those 3 nature points here, and you would have, would have been just the same as getting larger. What you're paying for it, though, is the defense and the packing. In addition, you also get +2 map move. Map move is kind of a threshold thing. If you're map move 10, if you go up to 12, which this will take you, what that's going to mean is that if there's no other kind of penalties for terrain movement, you're now map move 2 on the strategic map, and that can be a really big deal. So, yeah, that's another definite reason to consider taking larger, is if you're map move 10 and it can knock you up to 12. Okay, so there's one other thing I want to emphasize on this bless while we're at the bless screen, then we'll kind of pull up some examples. But one thing I want to emphasize is it's kind of a fine print detail in a lot of the blesses, but if you look down here in the description at the bottom, it says all sacred units of size 5 or larger, or size 5 or less will be larger. Whereas if you look at something else, like Strength of Earth, it says blessed units will receive increased strength +2. Now, what's an important thing to notice about this is sacred versus blessed. Larger, not only is it not incarnate, meaning it's always going to be active, but it affects sacred units, not blessed. And what that means is even if you don't bless your units, the fact that they are sacred, they already are going to get this benefit. So it's going to affect you on the strategic map. That's kind of useful if you're getting nuked by like flames from the sky and stuff. That HP bonus can be very helpful in that case. Or things like Seeking Arrow. Yeah, so it's, going to be useful on the strategic map. It's also going to be useful if you're one of those nations that doesn't have access to a lot of priests. And there's a few nations that are like that, or nations that have trouble doing divine blessing. There's some nations like that. And we'll go through, and I'm going to miss some of them, but we'll go through and we'll talk about what some of these are. So, and I'm going to kind of wing this part. One of the class of nations where you want to consider taking larger is it's going to be any of the sacred cavalry nations that have a length 3 weapon, right? So in early age, there's going to be Pangaea. Pangaea has a length 3 weapon, and it will certainly enjoy the additional strength and hit points that's going to come with it. So yeah, this is definitely a candidate for larger. They certainly will enjoy the additional map move as well. Again, it's going to be painful losing the attack density here, but certainly worth considering. And then like in my Pangaea Blitz, I got 1 stack wiped by air elementals. That might not have happened if I had larger built into my Bless. So that's one example. Another example in early age would be something like Airmore. And Airmore has Sacred Cav, and they have a Light Lance. Oh wait, never mind. Their primary weapon here is a broadsword, so they're actually not going to get the benefit from the repel. So this actually wouldn't be as great of a candidate. I can't remember if Helheim gets a... Yeah, these guys are a decent candidate too, because they have a length 3 lance. This one, you can see it does not have a tag on the bottom which says only used once. A lot of times if you have a lance that you discard after you're done with the charge, you'll have that tag on it. Those are not really candidates for using larger for this purpose. Looking through here in early age, Sarmatia may... Yeah, Sarmatia would be another decent candidate. The other thing I think you want to consider when you're looking at, because when you do this, you're giving up density. And you have to make a decision on how important is it to give up density. One of the reasons you want to give up density is because a lot of times with these defense-based cavalry, them getting surrounded is how they're going to die. And a lot of times when you look at a fight, I've got a test game here. We're going to kind of go back and forth. But I've got a game here. Let's get some more heavy cav here. And then yes, we'll pull these guys back home. All right. So I want you to look at this. We're going to send in... We're going to send in 20 heavy cav. We're going to put them in a line. We're going to have them to attack closest. All right, we're going to send them in against yes. In this case, it's going to be larger Morvarks. But I'm not going to have that many. We're going to put only a few in, and they should lose this. We're only going to put a few in, and the reason is I want you to see what happens, how they get killed. We're going to look at this. Oh man, they actually won this. Who won? Okay, I thought they would lose, but they lost not quite how I thought they would. is the people who are going to die. Like, look, okay, we can kind of tell it from here. I was worried we might not be able to see, but look, this lady has already had glamour knocked off of her, right? And this lady has already had glamour knocked off of her. This lady is getting surrounded by everybody. The people in the middle are going to be fine because they really cannot get harassed down very much. So if we look at her defense, she's got a harass penalty of, okay, that's probably not a good one. This one, harass penalty of 2. Okay, they actually have the same kind of harass. Harass penalty of 5. We didn't really get a great surround. What a lot of times will happen when you look at these battles is the person on the corner is who's going to die. And a lot of times when you have these kind of high defense elf cavalry type of things, the people in the middle of the line are mostly fine, and the people on the edges of the line get wrecked. By decreasing attack density, you end up spreading your line out, so people have to bring a lot more troops to actually have an edge effect where they can envelop you. The downside is that for the people in the middle, they're going to have to be dealing with a lot of attacks. You know, like they're not going to have a buddy to split the harass penalty with. It's just them. But it's still a lot better than being completely surrounded on the edges. So that's a bit of the yin and the yang. The other thing is if we go ahead and we look at, this will give you a chance to see some of the combat logs here. Okay, Black Knight was repelled by Morvark Knight. Black Knight was repelled by Morvark Knight. Black Knight's hoof was repelled by Morvark Knight. So a ton of repels. And then what can happen is they're going to probably be taking a bunch of repelled damage. Morvark hit Black Knight for 0. Wait, this guy's been hit, right? Yeah, he's been hit a few times. Let's see if he's actually been hit. Okay, he's been hit for 5. Does that account for all the difference? No, he's got one more. For 5. I think he also got 1 damage tick from repel, which can happen. So anyway, that's important. The other thing is you are not going to ever be, or not ever, but you're much less likely to get repelled if you have a length 4 weapon. In other words, you'll only get repelled if there's a length 5 thing. And you actually don't, glamour repel, having the damage you take from repel, like if you were the person attacking and you get your attack repelled and then you pass a morale check and go through it anyway, you take damage from that, and that will actually pop glamour. So that's a thing. So all this to say, the repel is very significant. Spreading your troops out in a line will protect the edges. It's going to make it very much harder for people to get enveloped. But you're going to be a little bit softer on the inside. But you can see this guy still has a ton of defense, so it's not as big of a deal. The other nice thing about repel is it's very good at dealing with lance charges. Because these guys are running in, they get the lance charge. That first attack, they're gonna have to go through the full defense of these guys, and they're gonna have to go through a repel check. It's gonna be pretty rough. So anyway, that's that. We're gonna go back to the menu. I'm gonna talk about more nations real quick. So any of the Cav nations are going, so like that's Eos, it's Pangaea, it's Asphodel potentially. I think Marignon has swords. Yeah, so this is one of the lances that can only be used once. So Marignon I wouldn't work on, not that way. Pythium, no. Arco, no. I think early age maybe Arco, it may work on, I'm not sure, we'll have to check. Can't remember if they have lance. Yeah, so these guys it would work on. And a lot of times these guys especially would probably be good because you don't get, you know, these guys aren't, like, the attack density for these guys doesn't matter that much. And a lot of times they're not even going to have like a straight up line. They're just going to like jump Hail Mary into the back or into wherever. And, you know, the fact that you can pack 2 on a tile doesn't really matter that much. So I'd say Arco it's very good on. Oh, they're already size 4 though, so they don't benefit. Yeah, okay. So actually, I'm not sure if it would work that well because they're already size 4. It's not like it's going to jump up to size 5. I didn't realize they were size 4. So anyway, you could go through and you see what we're looking for. We're looking for if the lance that the cavalry has is a 1 use only, or if it's their main weapon. If it's their main weapon, it doesn't go away, and then it's going to bump up to size 4, and then it's a decent candidate for that part of their bless. Another class of nations are nations that have trouble blessing things. Like one example of that is kind of a famous example of that is Macone. Macone doesn't really have a lot of priests. You know, they have like this guy. But like the Polemarch, who's sacred, you may not have a priest following him around everywhere. And they're a pretty high HP dude, so they're going to enjoy the 30% bonus HP. You know, that's going to be pretty nice. They are not going to be... Actually, you know what I'm not sure about? I don't know. I think this actually may work. Oh, no, it won't work. Okay. I was thinking if an Amulet of Giants would stack, but that will only get them up to size 4, the Amulet of Giants. It won't get them up to size 5. But yeah, you know, on nations like this where you're going to have trouble blessing a lot of your stuff, it's worth picking up. Or considering it at least. You can't, you know, you do have priests, right? Like the Archons are priests, but the other thing is on size 4, either you fill in the gaps, so you have somebody else come in and they're going to fill in the gaps standing next to them, they're going to be the size 2 unit. If you don't really have great plans for that, going up to size 5 doesn't really cost you that much. The density packing issue is a little bit marginal once you go above size 3. So like, and when you're size 5, it doesn't matter really at all. It's kind of free to go to size 6 from a density issue. But anyway, nations like this, what are the other nations that kind of struggle to bless things? You know, like some of the nations are Tianqi. Tianqi, they don't really have holy 3s or anything, even though they have a tremendous number of sacreds. So like this guy, you're not going to get a repel or anything, but, you know, he'll enjoy the additional strength. He'll enjoy the additional HP. He'll enjoy the additional map move. And if you take a pretty minor bless on Tianqi and you're going mostly scales, this would be a great option, because one of the things you kind of have to dink around with Tianqi is having some crappy little mage priest follow all your expansion parties around, so you don't get any research done. So if you take larger, you don't have to worry about having somebody coming along and trying to bless these, and you have a bunch of summons that are sacred as Tianqi, and it's always like you're stringing together some kind of communion to get this guy up to do divine blessing. You don't have to worry about any of that if you have a bless which affects sacreds, not blessed units. If that makes any sense. So Tianqi, kind of another nation like that. The other nations which are kind of like that are like like Bandarlog. Bandarlog is kind of one of the nations where it's a bit annoying to get all of your guys blessed, because you have these little yogis who are running around, or the Brahmin who are running around, and you know, they're naked, they're dying to arrows all the time, and you're trying to use them to bless these dudes. And once you get in a larger, once you're in the mid game and you have a ton of sacreds and you want to bless them all, well, surprise, you don't even have holy mages who are you don't have astral priests who can jump into a communion. You have to rely on summons to get up to holy 3 to do divine blessing. So getting these guys blessed is actually like a huge pain in the ass. So it's worth, on nations where it's really hard to bless your sacreds, it's also worth doing. It will decrease your attack density, but it may be okay for you. Anyway, that is... What are some of the other nations that are like that, where it's hard to bless your stuff? Struggling a little bit. I can't remember. Kailasa can do it fine, but not great. You know, Kailasa... Oh, no, they have this guy. So yeah, Kailasa doesn't really struggle with that. I'm not going to sit here and go through them all, but you know what to look for, right? What you're looking for is if it's a nation that's really hard to bless your sacreds, like Macone or like Bandarlog, Those are candidates for taking a blessed that only affects sacreds. What are there's a few other things that only affect sacreds that doesn't affect blessed units. Like Spirit Sight is one of them. I'd have to go through and look at more, but I think there's maybe one or two other things that affect sacred units. Like all the survivals affect sacred units, right? So if you get swamp survival, mountain survival, all those things affect sacred units. I think Half Dead affects sacred units. There's a few things, if you go through and just read the description, there's a few things that affect sacreds and not blessed. And those are all things that you would want to consider maybe on nations where it's really hard to bless your troops. What are the giant nations that would benefit from it? Basically a nation like Hinnom, where you have size 5 dudes, bumping these guys up to size 6 would be mighty nice. The thing you have to consider in that trade-off is your Seir, which are size 3. They're one of the summons you get. They would go to size 4, which is going to decrease packing, which could be good or bad, depending on how you looked at it. I typically like higher attack density stuff, but you may decide, that's not for me, right? And honestly, every time I played Hinnom, I've never had enough Seir where I was like, certainly people have played Hinnom where they have enough Seir, but I personally, whenever I've played them, I've never had enough Seir where I'm like, okay, I'm not able to pack them densely enough, So anyway, I think it's definitely something to consider on a nation like Hinnom, where you can jump up from size 5 to size 6. It's a pretty nice little bump for these guys. The other giant nations like Femoria, they certainly wouldn't mind it. They have these guys who are already size 6, so they're not going to benefit from it, the Fomorian kings. But all your druids are size 4, so jumping them up to size 5, they would certainly appreciate it. And then they have their sacred unmarked, who would also not mind going from 4 to 5. Going from 4 to 5 is kind of nice, but it also, you're not going to be able to pack in size 2 units with them anymore, and you're not going to be getting an additional kind of repel length thing. Like this is a link 3 weapon that's been bumped up to 4 because they're size 4. So it got that +1. But it's still something to take because to consider taking because these guys are pretty high HP dudes. Though it is a little bit questionable since your Fomorian kings are already size 6. What are the other giant nations we have? Niflheim. These guys are size 6, so probably not worth it. And yeah, I think we've covered most of them here. In Middle Age, the giants are mostly dead. You have Phaeacia, who has kind of colossi who are size 3. Going from size 3 to size 4 on a unit like this, I think it depends how you want to use them. But in general, I think you'd want to... Oh, one thing I didn't mention. The other thing, and this is back when we were looking at Sarmatia, because they've got the Sacred Cav that have the Lance, so they're one of the candidates for taking larger. One of the reasons you don't want to do it is if you have really good point buffing, because when you decrease your density, you're going to decrease the effectiveness of your point buffing. So a nation like Sarmatia, which has excellent point buffing, you would probably not want to take larger, in my opinion, because even though it might be nice for the repel things, it's not nice when you consider it how it basically destroys their point buffing opportunities. And Phaeacia also has decent point buffing, though I don't think... not on the level of like Sarmatia. But yeah, you could take it on these guys. Knock these guys up to size 4. Yeah, I'm not sure. Be okay. So that is one of the categories, is giants. I know I've seen it taken on Ubar, which is kind of interesting. And one of the nice things about taking on Ubar is if you're one of the nations where some of the units you get when your real cap comes online, the Big Gen, they require a size 4 guy to lead them. And these guys are only size 3, but they're sacred. So if you get enlarged, then your size 3 who would normally not be able to lead the Big Gen all of a sudden can. So that would be a kind of cool thing. And then their big dude they get... these guys, they're size 5, so it jumps them up to size 6, which is pretty nice. And then these warriors they get who are size 4 jumps them up to size 5, which is also nice. So I think it's also worth considering on a nation like Ubar. And then for that reason, it may also be kind of okay on Nabaa. Looking through here for things that we don't really have a ton of giants. Agartha, they still have some giants. Agartha is another nation that could potentially consider it. They have a bunch of size 4 dudes. I don't think early age Agartha has access to size 5. I think they're all still... I think Agarthans are basically size 4 or bust. But just having so much HP, this is a very efficient way to get additional HP on your guys. And honestly, their defense is already so bad, they don't even really care about the defense malice. It's like, so what? We're going to get hit every single turn anyway. So in that way, it's really just a very efficient way to get extra HP on your guys. And the additional strength is nice, but not exactly needed. You're basically doing it as a way to get extra map move, which would be super nice on these guys. Bumping them up to 12, they would super appreciate. And most importantly, getting that HP. Yeah. So those are, you can find out what all the giant nations are that have sacreds. I wonder if Yomi might actually be a decent candidate for it. Whoops. Yomi, I think these guys are size 4. Yeah. So bumping them up to size 5, they would certainly appreciate. They also are a nation that, like, these are such good combat paths. They kind of don't want to waste the turn blessing themselves. And that's another kind of fine print detail for the sacred stuff, is not only do you not need a priest, but even if you are a priest and you're like a super combatant, you don't have to waste the turn blessing yourself, which is nice. So, for that reason, it's worth considering on some of these super combatant nations that don't have size 5 super combatants, is you actually don't even have to waste a turn blessing yourself to pull it off. But yeah, that is the Dione. And I think that would probably be okay with these guys. They have some sacred summons too, which would be kind of nice. And these guys certainly would appreciate the additional map move. Knocking these guys up from 10 to 12. What are these guys map move? 16 to 18, they wouldn't mind. Yeah, and these guys definitely wouldn't mind I think larger is definitely viable on a nation like Yomi. The Shikomi, I can't remember if they're size 2 or size 3. They're one of your summons you get. But if they're size 2, they would really like it. Size 2 going to size 3 is kind of nice. Size 3 going to size 4 is kind of weird. Oh, another nation that has trouble blessing themselves I didn't mention was Marverni. And Marverni, they can't... Look, they have Astral somewhere. They have Astral Priest, so they can jump into a Communion, do Divine Blessing, but they have to bring enough mages to do a Communion to do Divine Blessing, to usually get big swaths of dudes blessed. And they have Boars, which they may not want to have that kind of mage commitment everywhere. Larger is so good on Boars, because it's going to increase their ability to trample stuff. Very nice. And you don't need to bring mages or priests to get them all blessed. You can just have them being led by an indie commander, which is how Boars kind of want to do. Additionally, it's pretty nice on Boar Warriors, who are size 2, so it just puts them up to size 3, so it lowers some of their density, but it's probably fine. It's probably fine. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's other candidate nations. A nation like Lanka could consider it. Anytime you have thugs who are size 3... It's like Lanka has thugs who are size 3, Phaecia has thugs who are size 3. If you want to try doing repel thugging, you could do that. But in my opinion, that's like super niche and situational when you would want to do that. Yeah. I can't think of anything else at the moment. Gath is another one of the giant nations. They got these guys who are size 5. They wouldn't mind, same thing probably with Ashdod. They probably would all the size 5 giant nations would probably consider looking at a larger bless. Again, it's going to decrease the attack density on things like your Seir, which is for Gath one of the big plays they're going to be making in the late game. And they're going to be doing Seir in a bigger way than Hinnom is. So for them, that attack density trade-off is probably a little bit bigger and sharper than it is for Hinnom. But yeah, I mean, if we're looking back on it, really, it's an efficient way to get HP and strength. It is. If you are cool with the attack density thing not mattering as much. I mean, even for a nation like Man, it may not be that bad. It's like these guys get more strength and HP. Your wardens get more strength and HP. They certainly aren't going to mind it. They certainly will appreciate the additional map move too. It's not great for this nation, but it's not horrible. It's an efficient way to get strength and HP. If you don't mind the debuff on defense and attack density. Jotunheim, or I think we're on Utgard. These guys probably wouldn't mind getting larger. They do have pretty efficient priests to bless them, so it's not like they struggle getting blessed. But, going from size 4 to size 5 is okay. I wouldn't say it's great on these guys, but it's an efficient way to get hit points, which I've said a lot now. Yeah. So anyway, I think we've covered most of the times when you would want to get larger in a blessing. Usually the main use cases are you're a Sacred Cav with a Link 3 weapon that you want to get up to start repelling. Or you're a nation that has really high HP troops where you really want that efficient bump to HP. Where you're worried or want to reduce the impact of things like trampling. You also want to take it if you're a nation that doesn't do a lot of point buffing. Because if you're a nation that does a lot of point buffing, then decreasing density is not going to be great for you. But yeah, if you don't do a ton of point buffing, and then one of those other two categories kind of fits, even honestly, you can also just do it for the map move and for the hit points and for the strength. Even if you're not getting a super great deal, even if you just want like 3 or 4 extra hit points on your units, it can be better than Resilient. So anyway, I think we have covered larger. I think it's a very good bless. I see a lot of the really high-end players, some of the better players in the community picking it a fair bit. There's been several nations where I've thought about it or wanted to take it. I've actually never taken it on a bless. And so maybe I need to think about it. Well, no, I took it in the clown game, so that's not true. And that's right, there's a clown game. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I hope you at least learned one little thing. So I will see you all next time. Bye.